Okay, this is the recording for the chapter 3 notes. Again, this should be a review for you when it comes to this material. Okay, um, this is something I know you're probably here just for the notes that I do think is valuable. In your chapter 3 and 4 module, we worked through some algebra tiles of what we're doing. I have some slides to kind of work through some with you just to model the expression. So if I have x squared and then I have 3x's, and then I have 4 ones, and all I'm doing is modeling what they have here. And then a negative x squared. I have 2 x's and 5 negatives ones. The reason I do this is one of the things we talked about in our week of inspired math is that math is visual. It's very important that you see that in some ways. And it stops a lot of common mistakes when you start to visualize it instead of trying to remember a rule. So as I combine these, you can see whenever I show it this way, I no longer get people telling me this is 3x cubed or something. The misconception is gone. If I have a negative x squared, that cancels with the positive x squared. So these two are gone. Okay? And I can see I now have 5 x's, and so the x squared and the negative x squared canceled each other out. I have 3x plus 2x is giving me the 5x's. And then again, I have some 1s. So I'm not sure if you learned how to do integers this way, but these will cancel out as well. So all of these disappear because a positive cancels a negative, and I'm left with 5x minus 1. So the x squared minus x squared, we saw that canceled out. 3x plus 2x gives me the 5x's, and 4 ones plus 5 negative ones left me with negative 1. So to simplify this, your answer would be, actually I'm going to have to leave this like this. Simplifying, because it's an expression, would be 5x minus 1 or 5x plus negative 1. Okay, and then I had them work Chromebook, sorry. 2 problems on that website. If you're interested, it is in your chapter 3 and 4 module. Then we worked in the distributive property. Here I have negative 1 and 4x minus 3. Again, if you go back to this, push pause, you can see what you need to do on the other tabs, so you can see how to work through it on the computer. So I have negative 1 is one of my factors. So I have negative 1 and 4x minus 3. So 1, 2, 4, 3 ones. I made a pretty big one, didn't I? And basically what I'm trying to show you here is the grouping, and that you're making an area. You learned this before when you did multiplication just with easy numbers. How many are in 2 rows of 3? 6, and that's how you learn to multiply. So negative 1 times x gives me a negative x. So that goes here. And that gets repeated. Okay, so 4 times. And so you'd have negative 4x's, and those would line up across here. And then the 1 times negative 1 would give you, I'm sorry, these are 3 negatives. Negative 1, so it was 4x minus 3. So I have 4 x's, negative x's. and 3 positive ones. Because a negative 1 times a negative 1 gives me an area of positive 1, positive 1, positive 1. So my answer would be negative 4x plus 3. So we talked a little bit about these vocabulary words and properties. And then I'm going to ask you just push pause for just a moment and try to simplify this expression using the distributive property and combining like terms. Okay, one way to look at this step right here, you don't have to do this. This is more if it's helpful to you. And all I did here, subtraction is really addition. It's the same as adding a negative. So if that helps you, because sometimes I have people distribute the 2 and not a negative 2. So if that helps you, that's step optional if you need it. Okay, I have 3 groups of 5x, that's 15x. I have 3 groups of negative 7, that's negative 21. Negative 2 groups of x, negative 2x. Negative 2 groups of negative 8, that's my positive 16. I combine my like terms, and I get 13x plus negative 5 or 13x minus 5. Either answer you put in the blank, they're both right. Okay, then we have some problems here for you to work on. I'm going to go full screen on this for a moment so that you can hopefully see them all. See if I can shrink it up a little bit. So what I'd like you to do is push pause, work through these problems on your own, and then come back to check your answers. All right. The answers are here. Biggest problem we had in class was right here. And x times 3x is 3x squared. That's 3 times x times x. When you're multiplying multiple x's, it's an exponent. That's what an exponent is. You'll remember in chapters 1 and 2, we kind of reviewed what does an exponent mean. So x times 3x is 3x squared. X times 5 is 5 minus 5x. So here's your answers. The 1/3, it's called the definition of division, is the same as dividing by 3. So you could just divide all of these by 3. Watch this one here. You may have not multiplied the x and the 4x to get 4x squared, not just 4x. So if you need to look at these answers and check a few things, if you have a question, circle it and write your question down and come see me in class to ask your specific question. So please push pause, check these answers, and write down any questions you may have. The next thing we did were factor 2x plus 4 and x squared plus 3x. Now, let's go back to this. Basically what you're doing is looking to make a rectangle. So I have 2 x's and I have 4 1's. So how can I use them to make a rectangle? It's kind of like the opposite of what we were doing before. Before I gave you what were called the factors here, and we had to build the rectangle. Now we're doing the opposite way. So it's like a puzzle. You move around till you get a nice even rectangle. So I'm going to move these here. Try my best to line them up. Okay. And then what would these sides be to represent that? Well, this would be x plus 2 that's the factor here, and these would be 2. So when you're factoring out the greatest common factor, I apologize for the problems my computer's having. If I said, what is this factored out? You would tell me it is 2 groups of x plus 2. And how am I figuring it out? Here's my one factor, 2. Here's my other factor, x plus 2. Now when we do the next one, I have an x squared and 3 negative x's. So I'm going to take one out. I'm going to spin it. Actually, I don't even need to spin it. Okay, I can just add these onto the bottom. Okay, this gives me my nice rectangle if they all lined up. So what are my sides? Well, I have an x here, because that's, see how the lengths match up? I have another x here. That's how I'm going to make that x squared. Okay, now the length of this is a 1, or a negative 1. And this is an x, so this is going to be a negative 1, negative 1, negative 1. So these are going to be 3 negative 1s. So what is this factor? It is x times x minus 3. So you're going to look, I used a different number than I had before. So let me... So I have 3x and 6y. Is there a number that can divide into 3 and 6? 3. Now look at the variable. Do they have any variable in common? And I answered that over here. No, x and y are not the same variable. So they don't have a common variable, but they do have a common factor of 3 in the number. So you factor out the 3, and what are you left with? Well, 3x divided by 3 gives me x. 12y divided by 3 gives me 4y. And you can check this. If I distribute this back in, will I get this? And the answer is yes. So I'd like you to try, push pause, try these, and come back for your answer. Okay. Let's see if I can shrink this up a little bit so you can see the answers. In this one, you may have pulled the 5 and forgotten about the x also. You need to pull both. It's pulling the greatest of the common factors. The same thing may have happened here. Be careful when you pull one of the numbers. 6x divided by 6 gives me x. 6 divided by 6 gives me 1. You want to check. If you just put 6 times x, if you multiplied that back out, you wouldn't get 6x minus 6. You would just get 6x. Okay? So again, be careful. These two, you may have only, the top two, you may have only pulled one of the common factors and not the greatest common factor. Please, again, circle anything that you have a question about. Write your question down and come see me if you're having trouble.